2 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, read together with rules of procedure of the Commission 27 of 2020. The session is being held within the context of the Commission's year-long celebration that commenced in January of 2021, which celebrates the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the Charter, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. In a short while, the proceedings will begin. There are 2 parts of today's proceedings. The first part is the receiving of a set of statements from Their Excellency guest speakers. The second part is a short ceremony to swear in 4 elected officials, members of the Commission. We will now commence our proceedings. Your Excellency Mamadou Saliou Sow, Secretary of State to the Minister of Justice, in charge of promotion of human rights and good governance of the Republic of Senegal. Honorable Solomon Desso, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Excellencies, Ministers of State Parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Your Excellency Ana Celeste Januaro, Secretary of State for Human Rights of the Republic of Angola. Honorable Lady Justice Imani Daud Aboud, President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Ambassador Salah Siddiq Hamad, representing His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency Eamon Gilmore, European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. Honorable Vice Chairperson and Commissioners of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Mr. Marcel Akpovo, Director and Regional Representative for East Africa Regional Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Advocate Joseph Whittle, Vice President of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions and Commissioner for Human Rights and Administrative Justice of Ghana. Mrs. Hannah Foster, Executive Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies and spokesperson of the NGO Forum. Distinguished delegates of state parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Representatives of national human rights institutions. Representatives of international organizations. Representatives of non-governmental organizations. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to the opening ceremony of the 69th Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. My name is Lindiwe Kumalo. I'm the Acting Secretary to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. At this point, the ceremony will mark its commencement with the African Union anthem. And in that regard, kindly permit me to request Your Excellencies, representatives of state parties, African Union organs, and all organizations here present to assume a solemn posture as the AU anthem is played. Thank you. I will now take you through the order of proceedings for this 69th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. We will first commence with a statement by the spokesperson of the NGO Forum. This will be followed by a statement by the Vice Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions. Then we will have a statement by the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. This will be followed by a statement from the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Then we will have a statement on behalf of state parties to the African Charter, delivered by the Secretary of State for Human Rights of the Republic of Angola. After that, we will have a statement by the President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. Then we will have the honor of listening to the statement of the Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. This will be followed by the statement of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission. And finally, we will receive a statement by the representative of state parties and the Secretary of State to the Minister of Justice in charge of the promotion of human rights and good governance of Senegal, who will also deliver a statement and formally declare the 69th ordinary session open. After this, we will have a brief swearing in of four members of the Commission who were elected at the 39th ordinary session of the Executive Council of the African Union in October of 2021. We will then conclude with closing remarks by the Dean of the Commission, Honorable Commissioner Maya Sali Fadel. And this will bring the opening ceremony to an end. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, I now wish to call upon the spokesperson of the NGO Forum, Mrs. Hannah Foster, to deliver a statement on behalf of the NGOs. Madam Foster, you have the floor.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Acting Secretary Lindwe Komolo, for giving me the floor. With your kind permission, I would like to recognize Honorable Mamadou Saliou Sow of the Republic of Senegal, Your Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Vice Chairperson and members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable judges of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Chairperson and members of the Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, Your Excellency, Michelle Bachelet, Your Excellency, the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights, Honorable Salah Ahmed from the African Union Commission. I would like to stand on existing protocols and to say that all protocols respectfully observed. 40 years is indeed a significant milestone, a historic time indeed, whether it is in the life of a human being or any institution. It is a time to contemplate over those remarkable moments that have brought success in its wake, as well as those other moments we might have been challenged, changed our course, and or even be given an opportunity to journey on. It is indeed a time to pause, to reflect, and to get more prepared for a somber stance towards the encounters of the future, having been armed with the wisdom and experience of the past. Having been part of this remarkable journey, it is indeed, it is therefore my pleasure, coupled with a great sense of humility, that I present before this August gathering of the African Human Rights Community on this auspicious occasion of the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, charged with the responsibility to give a statement on behalf of all my colleagues of the Forum of NGOs in the work of the 69th Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Before I proceed, permit me to request that we observe a moment's silence for those founding fathers and mothers of the Charter, those commissioners who have passed on, giants on whose shoulders we continue to stand as we promote and protect human rights in Africa. We remember in particular the first chairperson, Mr. Isaac Ngwema, of blessed memory, under whose leadership the African Commission started its first foot forward. Allow me, at the onset, to extend our congratulations to the Honorable Chairperson, Dr. Solomon Ayele Derso, on his re-election to the African Commission, together with the newly appointed commissioners, namely Mr. Idrissa Sow, Mrs. Janet Sala Njai, and Ms. Aovina Topsy Sono. In the same vein, we would like to recognize the dedicated and distinguished service of the outgoing commissioners in the persons of Honorable Jemsina King, Honorable Sylvie Kaitesi, and we wish them well in their future assignments. We have not forgotten the late Honorable Ndame Gay, and we continue to pray for the repose of his soul. On behalf of the Governing Council of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, the NGO Forum Steering Committee, all the participants of the NGO Forum, and indeed on my behalf, I wish to thank the chairperson and members of the African Commission for affording us this opportunity to accompany this august body in its walk along memory lane in a bid to realign your priorities and chart your way, your forward direction. The forum wishes to express its gratitude to the government and people of the Republic of Senegal for hosting this virtual ordinary session. The Forum of NGOs was held virtually from the 10th to 12th November 2021, just before this session, of which is of significant importance. In keeping with the celebration of 40 years since the adoption of the African Charter this year, the forum adopted the theme celebrating 40 years of the African Charter. The forum noted that while Africa has seen significant and positive developments in the human rights and democracy situation on the continent, it is worthy to observe an improvement in the respect for human rights, good governance, and the rule of law. The African Charter has indeed laid an enviable foundation for the development of various instruments, with the African Commission making impressive decisions and mechanisms to match this growing tide. This noble body has been breathing life into the Charter by adopting rules of procedures, streaming its operations, and clarified various provisions of the Charter to state parties and other stakeholders. The Commission has also used the African Charter as a basis for developing guidelines, setting minimum standards for compliance, established mechanisms which have contributed to the building of jurisprudence, as well as the provisions of information to the Commission. Furthermore, the Commission, in monitoring the implementation of the Charter, made laudable contributions to international human rights law in its communications, examined the state reports of over 40 state parties, granted affiliate status to 30 national human rights institutions, and observer status to over 500 non-governmental institutions. Moreover, we are all here today, witnesses of this momentous session of the African Commission, and would like to take this opportunity to salute most especially all past and present commissioners, the acting secretary, and members of the Secretariat for continuing to keep the torch of human rights alight to all state parties and indeed to the peoples of Africa for whom this treaty was established. Congratulations are in order to the African Union Commission, particularly the Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security, formerly the Department of Political Affairs. The role of the African Union in standard setting, strengthening the continental framework to promote and protect human rights in Africa, has no doubt stimulated the pursuit of human rights, which has become an integral responsibility by ensuring that the human rights strategy for Africa is at the heart of the African governance architecture. The increased involvement of civil society organizations in the consultative processes are exemplary and commendable, and have indeed gone a long way to enhance partnerships and promote ownership of the various processes of the African people. While appreciating these developments, the forum asserted that from the north to south, east to west, and central, Africa continues to face serious human rights challenges characterized by conflict, insecurity, and violence, highlighting, among others, the rise in the case of violence against women. The forum noted with satisfaction the Commission of Inquiry into the situation surrounding the allegations of gross and systematic violations in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. The situation in some states have remained a cause for concern. Unconstitutional changes of government in a number of African countries, including Chad, Guinea-Conakry, Mali, and Sudan, where serious and massive human rights violations are being perpetrated against civilian population. Serious challenges which call for a constant and increasing strengthening of the protective and promotional mandate of the Commission. The inequalities brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic has further exacerbated the situation economically and politically, with limited and or no access to vaccines, especially in Africa. The attendant closing of civic space and the clampdown of protests, the increasing and continuing fundamentalism in many countries, including Nigeria, were also among the issues discussed. cognizant of the Peace and Security's decision to adopt African Commission Resolution 449 as a working document to address the pandemic in Africa, the forum commends the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and urges state parties to emulate this decision and engage in its implementation at the national level. The forum applauded the collaboration promoted by the African Commission with its various stakeholders in a bid to promote civic resilience of societies. The forum also launched the strategic plan of the Lusophone Platform for Human Rights and would like to thank all commissioners and facilitators who have contributed to the success of this process, especially ICNL, who have provided the financial support for the project. The outcome of the forum will be forwarded for the kind consideration of this august body as our contribution to your deliberations at the 69th session. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of participants, please allow me to reiterate the readiness of the forum, of the NGOs, to work with these mechanisms, particularly in the realization of their mandates, particularly the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. As partners in the process, we are committed to putting all our expertise and resources at the disposal of the African Commission in the realization of the various objectives. In the true spirit of the African Union's Constitutive Act, in which the heads of state of Africa professed a common vision of a united and strong Africa, energized by partnerships between government and all segments of civil society, representatives at the forum reaffirmed their commitment to the reinforcement of this partnership with the African Union and all its organs, not the least the African Commission, in the furtherance of human rights, good governance, and the rule of law. The forum participants have continued to demonstrate their dedication to the work of the African Commission and indeed the African Union Commission by their enthusiastic and passionate contributions to the preparations leading to their participation in this and other sessions. The forum, while pleased with the progress made by the African Commission, notes that various challenges with the potential to affect its effectiveness persist. We would like to take this opportunity to launch an appeal to states and indeed the international community to continue to support the strengthening of this institution, the African Commission on Human Rights, charged with monitoring the implementation of the African Charter. This will no doubt go a long way towards the effective implementation of its mandate. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the African Center and indeed the participants of the Forum of NGOs, allow me to wish the Honorable Chairperson, Solomon Ayele Derso, and all members of the Commission fruitful deliberations and a successful celebratory session. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Foster, for delivering the statement on behalf of African non-governmental organizations, and in doing so, saluting the role played by many actors to advance the work of the Commission and recommitting to collaborating with the Commission. Thank you. I would like to invite now the Vice Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions and Commissioner for Human Rights and Administrative Justice of Ghana, Advocate Joseph Whittle, to deliver his statement. Advocate Whittle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lindiwe, for the opportunity given to us to present the statement at the opening ceremony of the 69th Ordinary Session of the African Commission. The Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Dr. Solomon Derso, distinguished representatives of the AU member states, honorable members of the Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights, representatives of member states of the African Union, representatives of diplomatic corps, representatives of the national human rights institutions in Africa, representatives of non-governmental organizations, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the network of African national human rights institutions, I am greatly honored to address this 69th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Although we call it ordinary session, to us, it is an extraordinary session as it gives us an opportunity to reflect on the milestones we have made over the last 40 years since the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Today, the African Charter not only enjoys at least 54 ratifications all over the continent, but has also positively informed constitution-making processes and jurisprudence at the national level. As an overriding framework, the African Charter has filled legal lacuna in national laws as it becomes the next reference. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights as its custodian, and over the years, the regional body has provided an alternative upon exhaustion of or unavailability of local remedies of dealing with human rights violations at national level. These decisions have given hope to the right holders across the continent that beyond the national level, there are mechanisms for securing their rights. Guests, ladies and gentlemen, while we acknowledge the progress made in advancing human rights in Africa as enshrined in the African Charter, we also take note of the challenges the Africa Commission and the sister bodies have faced in fulfilling their mandate to right holders. In what can be linked to the ground-shaking decisions, which mostly are out of favor with the states, the Africa Commission, the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and the African Court on Human and People's Rights have faced reprisals in form of underfunding, disregard, and lack of implementation of the decisions, political interference, among others. While these agencies are established with a human rights mandate, the obligation of preserving human rights lies with the states. The regional bodies are therefore established to support the states in fulfilling their mandates as required by the national, regional, and international law and other legal frameworks. It is therefore the duty of the African states to strengthen the regional bodies, which will conversely reduce and even end interventions from the international mechanisms like the International Criminal Court. Africa is mature enough to decide on its fate. At NANRI, we have developed joint publications and hosted a raft of workshops and trainings for our members to help them in supporting the states in not only ratifying the African human rights instruments, but also in implementing the decisions from the regional bodies. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, riding on our Memorandum of Understanding with the African Union Commission, we have been implementing projects and programs aimed at influencing policy. In partnership with the African Union Commission, we convened the 5th Annual Policy Dialogue Forum on November 8th to 9th, 2021, on the state of the African NHRIs, under the theme, The Role of the African NHRIs in Promoting Arts, Culture, and Heritage as Catalysts for Socio-Economic Transformation. The topic was in tandem with the African Union theme of 2021, quote, the AU Year of the Arts, Culture, and Heritage, Levers for Building the Africa We Want. As we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the African Charter, we also hosted the 3rd NHRI's Forum on November 11th to 12th 2021 and discussed the 40 years of implementing the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, harnessing our collective experiences towards the Africa we want. Each of the two activities culminated in the adoption of a declaration and an action plan. The two documents will be shared with the Africa Commission in due course. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, while the founders of the African Charter envisioned an Africa where the human rights culture flourishes, it is, however, disheartening that a number of countries in Africa are wallowing in a sea of violations 4 decades later. I am particularly shattered by the escalating conflict in Ethiopia. The conflict between the federal government forces of Ethiopia and the Tigray Defense Forces has resulted in grievous violations of human rights. Hundreds of lives have been lost, thousands have been displaced, property worth millions of US dollars has been destroyed as the crisis turned violent since November 2020. The panic that gripped the country, which is the diplomatic headquarters of Africa, has triggered evacuation of staff and families of foreign missions from Ethiopia. While this is in the best interest of the countries, we cannot forget that Ethiopians do not have another country to run to. We cannot forget that a place they have called home for centuries is no longer habitable. We cannot forget the vulnerabilities of women, children, the elderly, among others, who cannot defend themselves. Ethiopians are looking at us to offer an African solution to the situation. It should also worry us on why we still have guns blazing in Mozambique, in Chad, Somalia, Mali, Guinea, Sudan, South Sudan, Eswatini, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Northern Nigeria, and the Sahel region in general. Besides, the institutions and mechanisms established under the Constitutive Act of the African Union and the African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance need to be activated now, and we as NHRIs will fully support them. On that note, the African Peace and Security Architecture, comprising the Peace and Security Council, the African Standby Force, including the 5 regional brigades and the peace must be fully operationalized. Today, we are meeting virtually because Africans vaccinated. Recovery from the pandemic may take longer as the global north prioritizes their citizens. As part of the recovery strategies from the negative impact of the pandemic, NANRI hosted the 13th Biennial Conference on November 3rd to 5th, 2021. The conference culminated in the adoption of the Harare Declaration and Plan of Action of African NHRIs in supporting a human rights-based approach to sustainable recovery during and beyond the pandemic. In this regard, we also call on the states led by the African Union to invest and accelerate local production of the vaccines to bridge the supply gaps. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we march into the next decade of the African Charter, we reaffirm our commitment to deepening our partnership with the African Commission and the other organs of the AU towards an Africa where the rights of all are a solid reality rather than an illusory vision. I thank you all.
Thank you, Advocate Whittle, for your statement, which highlights a number of human rights issues within the African continent. and makes a call upon the Commission to act. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I now wish to invite the Director and Regional Representative for East Africa, Regional Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Marcel Akpovo, to deliver a statement. Mr. Akpovo, you have the floor. I'm advised that Mr. Akpovo may not at this point be connected to the proceedings. Without offending protocol, I would like, in the circumstances, to move to the next speaker, and will accommodate Mr. Akpovo when he has been onboarded onto the platform. I would like to now turn the floor to His Excellency Eamon Gilmore, the European Union Special Representative for Human Rights. Mr. Gilmore, you have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, Chairperson Solomon Derso, Excellencies, members of the diplomatic community, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great privilege to be with you today on behalf of the European Union to address the opening ceremony of the 69th session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. This year is particularly significant as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. The European Union's partnership with the African Union and its human rights organs is rooted in common values and shared interests, and guided by a unique strategic vision for the future. It covers human rights and democracy, peace, security, the rule of law and good governance, sustainable development, trade and investment, climate change, digitalization, migration, and human mobility. We want to deepen and enrich this relationship, putting human rights and democracy at its core. The AU-EU ministerial meeting on the 25th and 26th of October in Kigali reflected exactly this. It is essential to ensure that human rights are central also in the upcoming AU-EU summit scheduled to take place in February 2022. Our annual human rights dialogue shows the seriousness of our firm commitment to promote and protect human rights on both continents, as well as worldwide. And I had the honor to co-chair the 17th EU-AU Human Rights Dialogue with Commissioner Bankole just last week. The dialogue confirmed our common interest to advance the human rights agenda on both continents, in particular, the abolition of the death penalty, transitional justice, gender equality and women's empowerment, and how to protect electoral and democratic integrity. On the agenda, we also discussed the right to development, and we intensified our discussions on business and human rights. We will continue to work together on transitional justice following the successful expert seminar that took place in October, organized by the AU, EU, Belgium, and academia. And I had the pleasure, together with Commissioner Bankole, to deliver a keynote address to that event. I would like to reiterate that the participation of AU human rights organs, including the African Commission for Human and People's Rights, remains critical to the success of the dialogue. You are at the forefront of the promotion and protection of human rights for all on the African continent, and your action is key to contribute to building the Africa Africans want. Of equal importance is the role of civil society, with which we all should maintain an open dialogue based on mutual trust and transparency. And I would like to congratulate the Commission on the recent decision to grant observer status to 7 NGOs, bringing the number to 535 organizations with this status. I want to express our particular concern in relation to recent developments in some countries. In Ethiopia, the alarming humanitarian situation and the deeply disturbing report of human rights violations and abuses, as well as violations of international humanitarian law, recently documented by the OHCHR and the ECHR, as well as the year-long impact of the conflict on civilians, is devastating. The military coup in Sudan, including reports of violence against peaceful protesters and the growing deteriorating security situation in the Sahel, remains of serious concern. The AU and EU stand together in firmly condemning human rights violations and abuses, serious violations of international humanitarian law, as well as attacks against democratically elected leaders whenever they occur. We jointly call for accountability for these violations and abuses. As I mentioned at the beginning, the African Charter turns 40 this year. The anniversary is an opportunity to reaffirm the full validity and force of the Charter as the legal foundation upon which the African system rests. It is important to celebrate the progress made to date, renew Africa's commitment to human rights, and to reflect on the way forward. Progress made on the implementation of the African Charter over the past 4 decades demonstrates the willingness of individual African countries and the African Union as a regional entity to live up to their international human rights obligations. Let me mention just 2 examples. The African continent is the only region that has a specific charter on the rights and welfare of the child. The African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child conducted the first of its kind campaign against child marriage at continental level. These results would have been hard to imagine 40 years ago. Respecting human rights is not a political choice for countries and governments. It is a legal obligation rooted in international and regional human rights instruments, such as the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Human rights do not belong to governments. They belong to the people, and governments must honor them. And we look forward to continuing our cooperation with the African Union and its human rights organs, as we are at our strongest and most resilient when we work together. Thank you for the honor of participating in your opening session, and I wish you all the best for your discussions in the coming days.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Eamon Gilmore of the European Union, for commending the work of the Commission in various thematic areas and emphasizing the collaboration between the EU and the Commission in the area of business and human rights and transitional justice, but also for raising concern on human rights issues in Africa and emphasizing the need for collaboration, deepened collaboration between the EU and the African Commission. Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now like to invite the Director and Regional Representative for East Africa, Regional Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Marcel Akpovo, to deliver his statement. You have the floor, Mr. Akpovo.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting Secretary for the Commission. And I'm sorry for what happened. I was with you. I was listening to everyone right from the beginning. So I don't know exactly why you couldn't see me, but probably that I have registered on the wrong platform. So now I'm with you. Honorable Chairperson of the Commission, dear Commissioners, and then distinguished delegates, I would wish to stand by the existing protocol and then say here, all protocol observed. On behalf of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, and on behalf of the High Commissioner herself, it is indeed a great honor for me to deliver this remark since I assumed the position of regional representative of OHCHR in East Africa. At the outset, let me convey the greetings from the High Commissioner, Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, who, as you know, could not be here with us due to the other commitment. But let me underscore the value that she places in the enormous work that you do in complementing the mandate of her office. Honorable Chairperson, Chair Commissioners, and then all the delegates, I would wish to focus. Can you hear me? Okay. I would wish to focus on a large part of my the High Commissioner's address I'm delivering to you on the impact of COVID on the human rights enjoyment on the continent. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has set an additional layer of challenges in our in our effort to deliver on the mandate of our respective institutions to ensure the protection and the promotion of human rights for all. At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the world witnessed states' abuse of emergency powers that unduly restricted the exercise of fundamental rights, including freedom of expression and a right to access information. Journalists, human rights defenders, and then other independent or critical voices have and then continue to be threatened and punished for speaking out about the extent of the situation in their countries or the measures adopted in response to the pandemic. A number of states adopted legislative measures that impose undue restriction on human rights without legal safeguard or sunset clauses, as you know. Additionally, we all have seen how pre-existing social norms and gender inequality, economic and social stress caused by the COVID pandemic, coupled with restricted movement and then social isolation measures, led to an exponential increase in sexual and gender-based violence. These victims look up to our respective institutions for redress, which must strive to provide using our respective mechanisms and procedures to ensure accountability. While COVID-19 might have improved in various countries, it is still with us, and then its impact on human rights will be lasting. These require our institution to strategically advance human rights for all. Honorable Chairperson, the gulf of inequality has not only widened, but also set back important progress and achievement made in promoting equality and non-discrimination over the decade. The devastating toll of COVID-19 on progress in the enjoyment of various economic, social, and cultural rights calls for new thinking in our approaches toward addressing the critical needs of our population, some of whom have fallen further down the rank of the economic ladder. The respect for human rights across the spectrum, including economic and social rights, and civil and political rights, will be fundamental to the success of building back better. It is for this reason that the theme for the Human Rights Day this year focuses on equality as a solution to provide opportunities within and then access to a fairer and a more inclusive society. It should be acknowledged that delivering on the promise of Agenda 2063 and then Agenda 2030 on sustainable development partly hinges on ensuring that a supranational human rights institution like this commission effectively execute their mandate of ensuring that they respect, protect, and fulfill the right of everyone, particularly those in situation of vulnerability. It should be recognized as well that inequality caused by adverse impact of a COVID-19 pandemic has a cascading effect on a number of factors, particularly those that generate discontent, and then conflict on the continent. It is therefore very critical that the Commission should also focus on identifying the early signs of conflict and deal with them from a human rights perspective. The Commission's work is very critical in raising the necessary alarm bell and potential conflict, since the cause of conflict are often rooted in failure to address violations of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Honorable Chairperson, turning to the cooperation of our respective institutions, I recall here that since the adoption of the Addis Ababa Roadmap, which was formalized, and then with the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, our institution held regular consultation on the margin of the sessions of the African Commission to agree on area of priority. And due to the COVID-19, our last consultation was held in 2019 until yesterday. The partnership that our two institutions have forged, as it's manifested in our Memorandum of Understanding, should help us develop programs and an activity that strengthen our complementarity in area of mutual interest and concern. And then in this regard, I have been very, very pleased to have held this full bench meeting with you yesterday to define area of convergence and then to assess progress that you have made, and then together forge our partnership, future partnership for the days to come for the interest of our two institutions. Honorable Chairperson, on behalf of the High Commissioner, I would be remiss if I did not touch upon the additional challenges posed by climate change on human rights, particularly now as the world leaders met to make commitment toward addressing the adverse impact of climate change on human rights. The threats that climate change presents affect a myriad of human rights, including the right to life, health, food, water and sanitation, freedom from discrimination, education, the right of children, cultural right, development, and the right to a healthy and sustainable environment. Global warming will spark an increase in extreme weather events, drought, flood, heat wave, wildfire, increased air pollution, water shortage, and then a host of other disruptive phenomena which will hamstring effort to improve our human rights capability to realize the human rights for all on the continent. As the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, in response to the last report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is code red for humanity. Our organization should therefore stand guard to play our role in addressing the human rights aspect of climate change. The Commission itself is well positioned to influence policy change through its analytical work on human rights institutions across the continent. I keep silent on the impact on the proliferation of a conflict on the continent and its impact on human rights, as we know, as the previous speakers have already touched upon. Honorable Chairperson, I'm aware that you have a very heavy program ahead of you for the next 3 weeks, including notably constructive dialogue with the 5 state parties. I therefore would like to extend my best wish to all of you for a successful and productive session as you start your deliberation this morning. I thank you for your attention, and I wish you very productive deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. Akpovo, for delivering a statement on behalf of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and in doing so raising a range of issues, which included the role of the Commission as an early warning mechanism within the context of conflict, the need to use its mechanisms to address the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 on vulnerable populations, the policy-making opportunities for the African Commission in the area of climate change, and recommitting to collaborating with the Commission within the context of the Addis Ababa framework. Thank you, sir, for your statement. We will now invite the Secretary of State for Human Rights for the Republic of Angola, Her Excellency Ana Celeste Januaro, to deliver a statement on behalf of state parties to the African Charter. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Muito bom dia a todos e todas. Excelência, senhor representante do presidente da Comissão da União Africana, Excelência Comissário Dr. Solomon Anderson, presidente da Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos, eu acho que não está. Sua Excelência representante da Alta Comissária das Nações Unidas para os Direitos Humanos, doutora Michelle Bachelet, Excelências representantes dos Estados da União Africana, ilustres representantes do Tribunal Africano dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos, ilustres representantes do Comitê Africano de Peritos sobre os Direitos e Bem-Estar da Criança, Excelência Sr. Helmond Gilmore, representante especial da União Europeia para os Direitos Humanos, Excelência Sr. Joseph Whittal, vice-presidente da Rede de Instituições Nacionais Africanas dos Direitos Humanos, ilustres representantes do Comitê Diretor das ONGs, ilustres representantes das Instituições Nacionais de Direitos Humanos, das organizações da sociedade civil nacionais e internacionais, distintos convidados, minhas senhoras e meus senhores. É para nós uma honra participar nesta 69ª sessão ordinária da Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos, intervindo em nome dos Estados partes da União Africana. Este ano celebramos os 40 anos desde a adoção pela União Africana da nossa Carta Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos em 1981. É tempo de reavaliarmos o nosso sistema de promoção e proteção dos direitos humanos em África e de colocar os órgãos, os organismos e organizações a conversar mais entre si, a realizarem mais atividades conjuntas e fortalecermos o nosso sistema. O sistema de cada país africano deve estar alinhado com a Carta Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos. Seria bom que todos os Estados tivessem um plano nacional de ação alinhado com os planos e compromissos africanos. Refiro-me à Agenda 2063 sobre a África que queremos, à Agenda Africana para a Criança 2040 e a Estratégia da União Africana para a Igualdade e Empoderamento da Mulher 2018-2028. É necessário que se reconheça os desafios do continente nesta matéria, muitos deles já refletidos nesta comissão. Os conflitos de vária ordem, as desigualdades sociais, o alto nível de pobreza e endemias, o elevado aumento do desemprego e a redução dos padrões de vida, levando ao aumento da pobreza extrema e da fome, o aumento dos conflitos, as crises sociopolíticas e de governação, prevalência contínua de violência sexual e de género, uso ilegal continuado das Forças Armadas de Segurança na violação dos direitos humanos e dos povos, em todos os aspectos e formas, prevalência de corrupção e sistemas de governação deficientes, entre outros. A boa governação e o respeito pelos direitos, pelo primado da lei, deve ser um dos nossos pilares fundamentais. Como diz o artigo 5º da nossa Carta, todo indivíduo tem o direito ao respeito da dignidade inerente à pessoa humana e ao reconhecimento da sua personalidade jurídica. Este deve ser um dos nossos objetivos diários, objetivos dos representantes dos Estados-membros, reconhecendo que nós, Estados, é que aprovamos a Carta. Objetivo dos comissários, enquanto especialistas eleitos para trabalhar na implementação da Carta, deixar legado e uma comissão melhor. Objetivo dos representantes das organizações da sociedade civil e de outros atores, enquanto analistas e pessoas que vivem todos os dias pelo e para os direitos humanos. O lema adotado pela União Africana para o ano 2021, o ano de Artes, Cultura e Patrimônio da União Africana, alavancas para construir a África que queremos, reflete bem a necessidade de recuperarmos, através da cultura, os valores e princípios africanos. E, por que não, o dito da filosofia africana Ubuntu: eu sou porque nós somos. Nós deve significar nós, África. Senhor Presidente, meus senhores e minhas senhoras, caros convidados, esta sessão ocorre uma vez mais numa altura em que o mundo continua após 1 ano e meio assolado pela pandemia da Covid-19. Lamentamos o facto de termos chegado aos 5 milhões de vidas perdidas no mundo. Em África, mais de 150 mil mortes e mais de 6 milhões de pessoas foram infectadas. Em termos de vacinação, planos de vacinação e a resposta à pandemia da Covid-19, infelizmente os dados apontam para menos de 10% de cidadãos vacinados, a existência de países que ainda não têm um plano de vacinação e retoma da vida após Covid-19. Temos que ter planos bastante inclusivos, abrangentes, para todos os cidadãos de forma gratuita. Planos que sirvam para os nacionais, para os estrangeiros, para os refugiados, para as pessoas indocumentadas, para grupos vulneráveis. Planos para todos. Senhor Presidente, meus senhores e minhas senhoras, a relação entre a Comissão e os Estados-membros deve ser reforçada. O apoio à ratificação e adesão aos documentos africanos, a elaboração de relatórios e reforço do diálogo e parceria. Sugerimos, por isso, que nesta sessão a Comissão adote um plano de trabalho específico para o pós 40 anos desde a adoção da nossa Carta. Finalizamos esta intervenção reiterando o compromisso com a Agenda Africana para o Desenvolvimento 2063, a Agenda Africana para a Criança 2040 e a Estratégia da União Africana para a Igualdade e Empoderamento da Mulher 2018-2028. Esta sessão, a 69ª, dá-nos a oportunidade de convergir mais uma vez como partes interessadas para fazer um balanço e refletir sobre o que foi realizado e os desafios a serem enfrentados para melhorar os direitos humanos em todas as formas e aspectos ao nível nacional, regional e continental. Desejamos aproveitar este momento para prestar homenagem aos nossos pais fundadores pela construção dos alicerces e pilares desta instituição, muito importante e admirável, a Comissão Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos. Em nome dos Estados-partes da Carta Africana dos Direitos Humanos e dos Povos, desejo registrar a nossa sincera gratidão a todos os comissários, aos membros do secretariado da Comissão, pelos esforços incansáveis, implacáveis e inestimáveis na promoção dos direitos humanos e dos povos em todo o continente africano, com o objetivo final de alcançar um ambiente justo, desenvolvido e pacífico para todos que nele vivem. Muito obrigada a todos e todas. Bem-haja a Comissão. Viva a África!
Thank you, Madam Secretary of State, for your statement on behalf of all the state parties to the African Charter, for expressing concern of the impact of COVID-19 on the continent and calling for greater access of the vaccine to populations of Africa, for endorsing and reaffirming the importance of the African Commission and making a call to member states to strengthen and improve relations with the Commission in view of the importance of the work of the Commission to the African continent. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I would now like to turn the floor to Honorable Lady Justice Imani Daud Aboud, the President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, to deliver her statement. President Aboud, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. His Excellency Amadou Saleh Sow, Secretary of State to the Minister of Justice in charge of promotion of human rights, good governance of the Republic of Senegal, representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, His Excellency Dr. Solomon Ayele Dessa, Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, His Excellency, the Chairperson of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and the Welfare of the Child, honorable members of the African Commission, Mr. Michael Apoko, Director and Regional Representative for East African Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, Mrs. Hannah Foster, Director of the African Center for Democracy and Human Rights Studies, Advocate Joseph Whittle, Vice Chairperson of the Network of National Human Rights Institutions, Mrs. Lindiwe Kumalo, Acting Secretary of the Commission, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. This year, Africa celebrates 40 years since the African Charter was adopted. It is beyond dispute that the Charter is in itself two revolutions in one. Firstly, in the political context of its adoption, the Charter was a darling proclamation of fundamental freedoms. Secondly, member states arguably conceded to establish a commission instead of the court which non-governmental stakeholders strongly advocated for. In the current context of a large African human rights system extended to a court and a children's committee, it is undeniable that the establishment of the commission was a critical ingredient to the Charter's reforms. In the decade that followed, the post-1990s so-called third wave of democratization in Africa, challenges relating to peace building, conflict resolutions, access to justice, and constitutional changes of government and power struggles, the Human Rights Treaty body of the African Union have effectively proved that justice can contribute to peace. Anyone who is in doubt about this should only imagine Africa and the African Union without the Banjul Commission, the African Court, and the African Children's Committee. Member states of the African Union have consistently reaffirmed this reality by pledging to the importance of human rights institutions of the Union, namely through the most recent commitments, such as Agenda 2063, where human rights and justice are reaffirmed as fundamental pillar of the regional integration. The foundation for these pledges is only a renewed recognition of the interrelatedness between classic human rights and governance, democracy, and the rule of law. It must be restated that the natural nexus between human rights and democracy is not to be sourced in the very recent interventions of human rights bodies of the African Union, including in the judgments of the African Court on political participation or civil rights. While consensus might be lacking on the impact of judgments of the court due to sensitive implication thereof, reality check ruthlessly reminds us that brutal breaches to constitutional orders and abrupt breaks on democratization process are still contemplated as means of assessing power when socio-political injustice cannot be resolved through institutional channels. Excellencies, honorable colleagues and distinguished guests, countries and regions that pride democratic credentials have counted on effective leaders, but mostly also on strong institutions, such as those in charge of enforcing social, political, and economic justice. At a time when the African Union is wrapping up its recent reform journey, human rights organs of the Union and other stakeholders, such as civil society institutions, gathering in this public session of the Commission need to join forces. Energies should be converged in ensuring that the institutional reform is thought beyond unilateral and individualized interests to meet the profound demands of the African Union of the people, the demands of the African we want. What Africa do we want? The African Union and member states say in Agenda 2063 that we want an Africa with stronger institutions. The African Court believes that we want institutions which may need to be reformed at a time when Africa's socio-political landscape itself is dynamic, with long-standing or changing challenges such as pandemics, social disasters, climate changes, terrorism, conflicts for resource control, democracy crisis, and leadership gap. As the African Commission embarks on its traditional exercise of scanning the situation of human rights in Africa, this may be the right time to engage with all stakeholders, but mainly with member states of the African Union on their commitment to the human rights mechanisms of the African Union. What has consistently and anonymously emerged from recent engagements at all levels of the regional integration discourse in Africa is that tremendous efforts are still needed if we are to achieve the Africa we want in terms of aspiration number 3 of Agenda 2063. It may be illusory to pursue an Africa where democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and good governance dictates the pace of regional integration if the institutional framework to support such endeavor is weak. As I guess, the interactions during this public session of the Commission will reveal any attentive observers knows that the current picture of human rights in Africa unquestionably justifies the enhancement of human rights institutions within the African Union and regional economic communities. It can be overruled that after initial decade of operation, human rights justice institution of the African Union might require an overhaul towards an ideal of enhancement. It is also undeniable that as much as member states of integration organization remains the main stakeholders in enforcing human rights, non-governmental actors should continue to retain a critical role in balancing interests in the process of rethinking or reshaping human rights protection and promotion mechanisms. In the meantime, human rights bodies themselves should redefine their intervention in such contexts by reverting to more adaptive institutional intelligence, which seeks to mitigate multiform realities. The African Court is committed to this idea and has endeavors over the recent months to implement an enhanced engagement plan with member states, but also with other stakeholders. The court is convinced that as the African Union has consistently advanced, only strong institutions can help achieve regional integration and socioeconomic development. It is my hope that the outcome of this session of the Commission only provides additional evidence of institutional impact and need for innovative reforms. I congratulate the entire Commission and its leadership for efforts aimed at rethinking complementarity within our human rights system and wish the Commission a successful 69th ordinary session. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Honorable Lady Justice Aboud, for your statement on behalf of the African Court, for refreshing delegates on the remarkable historical journey that Africa has made since the adoption of the African Charter, for highlighting the importance of both the mandates of the Commission and the Court, and for making a clarion call for a joint collaborative approach to the institutional reform and redesign of institutions with a human rights and governance mandate within the African Union. Thank you, Lady Justice, for your statement. At this point, Your Excellencies and delegates, I would like to invite the chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Solomon Ayele Deso, to deliver his statement. Honorable Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony, Acting Secretary of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Excellencies, representatives of states parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, honorable members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, distinguished representatives of national human rights institutions, international organizations, and civil society institutions. Kindly allow me to stand on existing protocol and proceed with the delivery of the statement. Distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I start by wishing you all a very good morning or good afternoon from wherever you have joined us today for this 69th organization of the African Commission. It is my distinguished pleasure to welcome you all to this 69th organization of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which we are convening at the end of the year 2021, during which we have been commemorating the 40 years anniversary of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as many previous speakers made reference to earlier. Excellencies, distinguished participants. The commencement of this 69th organization of the Commission, standing at the end of 2021, represents an important occasion in terms of both the state of human and people's rights in Africa and that of our commission and indeed the African human rights system in general. As you all know, this year marks the 40 years anniversary since the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the founding treaty of the African human rights system, on which our own commission and indeed the African human rights system in general is built. As the year 2021 also comes to a close, we need to take review of how the human rights situation of the continent fared during the year. We also stand on the eve of the 20th anniversary of the African Union. As you all know, the African Union came into operation in 2002, given that the establishment of the AU led to paradigmatic normative change. The review of its 2 decades of operation in 2022 would, among others, require an assessment of the gap between the human and people's rights commitment of the continental body and its practice. Personally, for me, this session marks the end of both my first term as a member of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights and my 2-year term as a chairperson of the Commission. It's therefore only appropriate that I briefly report back on the work that has been accomplished vis-a-vis the schematic plan that I set out upon my election 2 years ago in November 2019. Excellencies, comrades, dear sisters and brothers. When opening the NGO forum last week, I pointed out that we are in a time of one of the worst recessions in terms of respect for and protection of human and people's rights on our continent. There is little dispute that we are indeed in such a state of recession. Developments that substantiate these are in abundance. They range from violations that may be considered inevitable and routine to those that involve violations resulting from the deliberate acts or omissions of state institutions or other sectors of society. Among others, the shrinking civic space continues to be very worrisome in many parts of the continent. At one level, this is a product of the misuse and misapplication of certain laws and the politicized use of security institutions for intimidating, assaulting, jailing, and silencing opposition political actors, human rights defenders and activists, the media and journalists. This has been in the making during the past decade, but the sweeping restrictions introduced in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the abusive application of such restrictions have made the already shrinking space much worse. The propensity of social media to give prominence to hardliners that advance extreme views and hence to fuel polarization has confounded the situation further by enabling those propagating populist nationalism, bigotry, xenophobia to dominate the space and the narrative and thereby crowding out moderate views. Accordingly, the threats for the civic space in Africa comes both vertically from the state and horizontally from the way communication technology is designed, deployed, and used. Relating to the shrinking civic space, and the major factor behind this situation is the growing democratic governance deficit on the continent. Despite some good examples, the overall trend on the continent in terms of democratization in other parts of the world is one of regression. Like other parts of the world, democratization in Africa has continued to deteriorate. For example, according to the 2021 report from Freedom House, the number of countries in Africa that are not free have increased from 14 in 2006-2008 to 20 in 2021. And only 7 countries, mostly small island countries on the continent, are today ranked as free, the lowest figure since 1991. The 2020 Mo Ibrahim African Governance Index finds that over the past decade, 20 countries, home to 49.9% of African population, have experienced declines in indicators
measure security and rule of law, participation, rights, and inclusion. Authoritarianism is on the rise. However, today's authoritarians have become adept at using the facade of elections and using the language of human rights and good governance while manipulating popular sentiments and instrumenting our fears, grievances, and insecurities to deflect criticism for their appalling human rights record. They are good at externalizing their failures and ineptitude. At the same time, elections are increasingly being held in an environment characterized by insecurity, fear, and violence, often orchestrated by the incumbent as a means of winning elections. This year has also witnessed the resurgence of military seizure of power, as pointed out earlier on. In 2019, there was one successful military seizure of power. There was another military seizure of power in 2020. 2021 made history by having 4 successful cases of military seizure of power, leading to the suspension of constitutional processes and hence the human rights guarantees in constitutions, the devolution of the legislative and executive branches of government in these 4 countries. It was in this context that Nigeria's vice president warned that we are sliding back to the infamous 1960s during the extraordinary session of the ECOWAS heads of state meeting. I wish to reiterate the concern that the Commission expressed in respect of each of these conditions, that military coups are contrary to fundamental rights and democratic principles, including Articles 13 and 20 of the African Charter. We reject and condemn the overthrow of civilian government in Sudan and join the African Union and others in the international community in calling the reinstatement of the civilian government and restoration of the transitional constitutional declaration in Sudan. Also of significant concern for us at the African Commission are the use of excessive force by security forces. We have witnessed these, among others, in Chad, Eswatini, and Sudan. We strongly condemn the use of lethal force by security forces in violation of the standards of the African Charter and reiterate our calls for the authorities in Eswatini to fully respect the right to peaceful protest and investigate reports of deaths and injuries resulting from excessive use of force by security forces. We look forward to the opportunity that the presentation of the periodic report of Eswatini presents us during the 69th ordinary session to engage the delegation of Eswatini on these issues. At the African Commission, we also once again express our grave alarm about the increasing frequency, speed, and brutality of terrorism-related violence on the continent and kidnappings for ransom. Apart from the violations that terrorist attacks produce, including indiscriminate killings and forced displacements, counter-terrorism operations also lead to deliberate or mistaken killing, rape, and sexual assault. We strongly condemn the recent terrorist attacks in Niger earlier this month that led to the death of at least 61 people. We reiterate our profound concern about the recurrence of kidnappings for ransom in Nigeria, which affected more than 1,000 people since the beginning of the year. We also condemn the deliberate or negligent killings of civilians during counter-terrorism operations in the Sahel, involving the security forces of countries such as Burkina Faso, Mali, Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and the French Operation Barkhane, while welcoming the work of national human rights institutions, particularly in Burkina Faso and Chad, in investigating and reporting on these incidents of violations. We also urge that other national human rights institutions emulate the work of these national human rights institutions for investigating and reporting on such issues in countries such as Mozambique as well. It is also disheartening that apart from terrorism-related violence, there has been increase in other conflict-related violence in many parts of the continent, as previous speakers made reference. We reiterate our continued concern about the conflict situations in Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, South Sudan, and Sudan. Excellencies, distinguished participants, the foregoing cases represent only a sample of the worrying trends in the state of human rights on our continent. The situation is much bleaker than what these cases exemplify. As I pointed out in my opening address to the Forum of National Human Rights Institutions last week, we are also at a time when we are witnessing unconscionable acts of violence that represent stains on our collective conscience. We are witnessing examples of such atrocious violations in the ongoing war in Ethiopia, whose intensity and geographic spread continues to put the lives, bodily integrity, peace and security, and livelihood of millions of people in grave peril. As the situation spirals out of control in the face of the collective failure to muster the will, courage, or imaginative capacity for ending the war, the worsening polarization, irresponsible propagation of hate and ethnic profiling, as well as the recent spike in ethnic-based arrests, have made the risk of mass atrocities alarmingly imminent. We therefore call for urgent actions to be taken to reverse the course of these developments, to avoid these grave risks of mass atrocities from materializing, and hence pushing the people of the country into further calamity. And we join the call of the African Union and the international community for urgent cessation of hostilities. In this respect, the African Commission wishes to remind conflict parties that they have obligations under the African Charter to take appropriate measures for peace and security under Article 23 of the African Charter, including, among others, the obligation to collaborate for initiatives for mediation and peacemaking. Our Commission also continues to be concerned by the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, including its socioeconomic and humanitarian impacts. The structural weaknesses that the COVID-19 pandemic exposed highlights the need for urgently rectifying the neglect by the social and economic policies of our societies, as well as by the human rights system, of the centrality of socioeconomic rights and the resultant gap between the promise of the rights and the lived realities of the masses of the people on our continent. Ladies and gentlemen, as we mark the 40 years anniversary of the African Charter, we are reminded that the African Charter was also a response, as one historical study on the background of the Charter put it, a response to the shame and embarrassment that some African leaders felt about the activities of some governments, in particular those of the governments of Idi Amin, Bokassa, and Guema. This is best illustrated by what the chairperson of the OAU, President Tolbert of Liberia, said in 1979 in his opening address to the OAU summit. I quote, "The principle of non-interference had become an excuse for our silence over inhuman actions committed by Africans against Africans. The provisions concerning human rights must be explicit," end of quote. The nature of the challenge that we face today are not ordinary. I actually believe that the human rights issues we face in our time actually threaten the very core of human and people's rights. The growing gap that these human rights issues have created between the promise of the African Charter and the realities on the ground are rendering our human rights protection mechanism hollow, creating very serious legitimacy crisis. This is why I wish to reiterate the point I made during this year's Africa Human Rights Day celebration, that we should feel the same shame and embarrassment that prompted our predecessors into rejecting the indignities facing the people of the continent and adopting the African Charter 40 years ago. This outrage should lead us to insist that Article 4 of the Constitutive Act is fully implemented so that our Commission and the African Union avoid the risk of totally betraying the raison d'etre for its very existence as enunciated in the objectives and principles of the Constitutive Act of the African Union. These issues put a spotlight on the role and effectiveness of human rights institutions at both national and continental levels. They challenge the will, courage, and capacity of institutions and the persons in charge of their leadership. We are at another inflection point, and I would like to believe that we will be able to rise to the occasion and change the course of events in order to realize the promise of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. This we have to do not in a business as usual fashion. The extraordinary nature of the situations necessitate extraordinary approach. Nothing less than revisiting the assumptions on which the human rights system is premised, the approach of human rights protection, the agility, set of skills and leadership qualities of our institutions are required. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, at the time of the election of the Bureau, the outgoing Bureau, there have been quite various strategic, institutional, and operational challenges facing the African Commission that we at the African Commission had to rise to the occasion to address. At the strategic level, the challenges we face include those of the prevalence of serious human rights challenges, the need for the development of a strategic plan of the Commission, mending the trust deficit that brought the relationship of the Commission with state parties to a breaking point, and the related challenge of upholding the independence of the Commission, and enhancing the public profile of both the Commission and its work for enhancing the impact of its human rights promotion and protection work. At the institutional and operational level, the Commission has for long suffered from chronic staffing shortages, seriously impeding its effective functioning, partly on account of lack of capacity to recruit its own staff and the needed leadership change at the level of the Secretariat. In the course of the past 2 years, with the collective leadership and work of members of the Commission, we have succeeded in addressing many of the strategic, institutional, and operational challenges that we have been encountering. We have therefore achieved the expansion of our engagement with not only the existing stakeholders, but also with others. Our engagement and collaboration with the wider African Union system have increased by many folds. We also have achieved the transition of leadership at the level of the Secretariat. We have also received from the Executive Council of the African Union the capacity to recruit the staff of the Secretariat, which is critical to remove one of the major impediments for enhancing the staff complement of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. I have to say that our efforts are therefore showing results. We are slowly regaining the confidence of states in the work of the Commission, despite continuing differences between the Commission and the state parties. We have also managed to expand the public profile of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, among others, through convening a high-level seminar during the Africa Human Rights Day, with the participation of the highest authorities of states parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. I wish to, in this respect, to thank the President of Botswana, President Masisi, for being the first keynote speaker during the 2020 Africa Human Rights Day. I wish to thank His Excellency President Macky Sall of Senegal for also being one of the keynote addresses for this year through the State Minister. During these past 2 years, the media coverage of our Commission also expanded tremendously, including through interviews and publications on the South African Broadcasting Corporation, Mail and Guardian, the BBC, and Al Jazeera, among others. We have enhanced our collaboration with national human rights institutions, NANRI, the Network of African National Institutions, NANRI, by launching the Forum of National Institutions ahead of the ordinary sessions of the African Commission. The third such forum was held last week. And we have initiated discussion with African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat for working together on the human rights dimension of the AfCFTA. It's also worth mentioning that as a commission that was responding to the emergency situation of the COVID-19 pandemic, I wish to recognize that our commission collectively and its individual members for being at the forefront of providing leadership on addressing the challenges of COVID-19 and the human rights issues arising from it through advancing a human rights-based approach to COVID-19. As Amnesty International reported, our commission is the first human rights body in the world to issue a prescriptive guidance to states on a human rights-based response to COVID-19. Our resolution 449 has become an authoritative framework for guiding the actions of states, the African Union, and various sectors of society for implementing a human rights-based response to the pandemic, including in addressing the challenge of access to COVID-19 vaccine. While I'm greatly satisfied with the progress we have made and effectively delivering on the objectives that we have set out when we were elected 2 years ago, I feel deeply concerned about the overall state of human and people's rights on our continent, as I have pointed out earlier on. As I observed on many occasions, we are also at a time when we face very serious structural human rights issues, including the resurgence of armed conflicts and violence, massive poverty and deepening inequality accentuated by weak institutional and policy response capacity, the pervasiveness of the gender oppression, and the human rights dimensions of climate emergency. On climate emergency, one fully agrees with the Secretary General Guterres warning that we have a code red for humanity with particularly devastating consequences to the most vulnerable, for whom climate action has to be founded on climate justice that fully recognizes the level of responsibilities of various parts of the world for putting our house, the planet, on fire, and affirm the right to development of Africa and other parts of the developing world. I'm sure you all agree with me that the progress that we have registered is not a match to the challenge threatening the human rights system. It is on this sober reality that we should inform our plans and approach as we look into the future and the year 2022, during which we will mark the 20 years anniversary of the African Union. Your Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude my opening remark and my tenure as chairperson of the Commission, it will be remiss of me if I don't take the opportunity for expressing my deep gratitude for the collaboration, counsel, and comradeship that many of you present here extended to me during the past 2 years. I wish to thank the members of the Commission for the trust that they bestowed on myself and the Vice Chairperson at the Bureau to lead this Commission during the past 2 years. I also wish to thank the members of the Secretariat under the leadership of the Acting Secretary, Madam Lindiwe Kumar. And I wish to particularly recognize the support that I received from the legal officers who supported over those many years, particularly Madam Abiola and Elsa B. I am also greatly indebted to the collaboration and support that we received from state parties during the past 2 years, which contributed towards commencing the journey of rebuilding trust with the Commission. I can't emphasize enough the indispensability of the support and collaboration we received from NHRIs and civil society organizations in the pursuit of the agenda of the Commission during the past 2 years. At this point, kindly allow me to also warmly welcome the newly elected members of the Commission and wish them successful and productive time during their tenure as members of the African Commission. Similarly, I wish to extend our gratitude to the outgoing commissioners, including Commissioner King and Commissioner Kaitesi, as well as Commissioner Amesbury, who couldn't continue to be with us due to health reasons. I wish to thank them for their distinguished service in the promotion and protection of human rights on our continent. I also extend my best wishes for the next Bureau of the Commission, which I hope will take the work of the Commission to another height, and urge all of you to extend your full collaboration to the new leadership of the Commission that will be elected today. I wish to thank all of you for your kind attention and wish us all a very productive 6 lines ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson Solomon Deso, for your statement to this session. which provided an extensive end of tenure report back on reflections on human rights issues generally in the African continent, but for also pointing out some of the key opportunities for further work at a strategic, institutional, and operational level. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson, for your statement. It is now my singular honor to invite Ambassador Salah Siddiq Hamad to deliver a statement on behalf of His Excellency Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Ambassador Salah, you have the floor.
Thank you very, very much indeed, my dear sister and colleague, Lindiwe, moderator of this opening ceremony. And as you clearly stated, this statement is delivered on his behalf, on behalf of His Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency, representative of the government of the Republic of Senegal, Your Excellencies, ministers and heads of delegations, delegates of state parties to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and Honorable Commissioners, members of the Commission, Honorable President of the African Court on Human and People's Rights, Honorable Chairperson of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, Your Excellency, the EU Special Representative for Human Rights, distinguished representative of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Your Excellencies, ambassadors and members of the Diplomatic Corps, Honorable Vice Chairperson of the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions, distinguished representative of the UN agencies, distinguished representatives of the civil society and non-governmental organization, colleagues from the Secretariat of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, led by my dear friend and colleague, Madame Lindiwe Khumalo, the acting secretary, executive secretary of the Commission, colleagues from the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. On behalf of His Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, and His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adoyi, the African Union Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security, I feel greatly honored and privileged to have been afforded this opportunity to address this August Assembly on the occasion of the 69th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. I wish to begin by thanking the people and the government of the Republic of Senegal for hosting this session virtually. Let me also from the onset congratulate you, Honorable Commissioner Dr. Solomon Dereso, Chairperson of the Commission, together or along with your colleagues, Honorable Commissioners of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, for the diligent manner in which this ordinary session has been organized. I also wish to seize this opportunity to welcome the newly elected commissioners, as well as to wish those who are departing the Commission all the best of wishes. Serving the Commission as commissioners is indeed a noble cause, and indeed it's part of the efforts to promote and protect human and people's rights in Africa. In the same vein, I wish to seize this opportunity to congratulate Honorable Chairperson and the entire Commission for being elected as the chair of the African Governance Platform of the African Governance Architecture and the African Peace and Security Architecture known as AGA-APSA synergies. A leadership role that is important in bringing the AU organs, institutions, and the regional economic communities together to speak with one voice on issues related to governance, human rights, and peace and security in Africa. I also would like to recognize and thank members of the Secretariat of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for their hard work and for being the catalyst for the effectiveness of the Commission. I must also extend my gratitude to all delegates of AU member states and participants for making the time to be part of this very important session despite their busy schedules. It is my belief that the deliberations and outcomes of this ordinary session will go a long way in enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of the African human and people's rights system, particularly during this time of crisis, the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the adoption of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and as we proceed collectively to promote and protect human and people's rights, we must admit the challenge faced by our beloved continent during this time of COVID-19 pandemic. This requires us to focus our eyes on how best to advance the socioeconomic rights as well as the political rights and address issues related to underdevelopment, poverty, inequality, marginalization, and exclusion on our continent. This, of course, as we make efforts toward effective implementation of Agenda 2063. Beyond pursuing our noble agenda for greater enjoyment of civil rights and political liberties, we have to redouble our efforts as AU member states, as well as African citizens, to ensure that all African people are enjoying the right to food, the right to health, the right to safe water and sanitation, as well as the right to housing and the right to education. This, of course, in addition to the right to decent clothing, as well as education, and above all, the right to clean environment. The African continent witnessed decades of numerous human rights challenges and abuses, resulting from a diverse range of factors, which include, among others, wars, poverty, corruption, democratic governance, and exclusion of marginalized groups, as well as, of course, unemployment of young men and women. It is against this backdrop that our heads of state and government solemnly resolve to promote and safeguard freedom, justice, equality, and human dignity in Africa by declaring the Human and People's Rights Decade, which come with a 10-year action plan that begins as of this year, 2021, to better coordinate our efforts as an African Union family to support our member states to fulfill their human rights obligations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite the growing governance deficit in Africa, time has come for the African continent to overcome decades of human rights challenges. And this, of course, will be by joining efforts to collectively promote and protect human and people's rights on the continent. I wish to seize this opportunity to call on all AU member states to cooperate with all AU organs, in particular, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and to do their best to implement decisions and recommendations made by our noble human rights organs, our noble organs with a human rights mandate. In this regard, member states are urged to submit regular reports to the African Commission as well as other organs with a human rights mandate in order to ensure that the promotion and protection of human and people's rights is in line with our African shared values and instruments. This 69th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights is an opportunity to consolidate the gains made so far in the promotion and protection of human and people's rights despite all challenges faced. but most importantly, to have on the responsibility of our member states in upholding the human rights of their citizens without any discrimination or abuse. This session is also an opportunity to further remind our AU member states on the need to develop various strategic responses to COVID-19 that are guided by the principles enshrined in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as well as all other African Union shared values and instruments. Once again, I would like to express our appreciation to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights for organizing this important gathering and invite you all to contribute your ideas, suggestions on how we can move collectively to promote and protect human and people's rights in Africa, and also to make this session a success. I thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador Salah, for the statement of His Excellency Moussa Faki Mahamat, and to express on behalf of the Commission the highest gratitude to His Excellency for his valued statement, reaffirming the important mandate and role of the Commission in strengthening human rights, governance, and democracy in Africa. Thank you. At this juncture, and with great honor, I invite His Excellency Mamadou Saliou Sow, Secretary of State to the Minister of Justice in charge of the promotion of human rights, good governance of the Republic of Senegal, to deliver his statement and to formally declare the 69th Ordinary Session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights open. Your Excellency, Secretary of State, Minister Sow, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Secrétaire Générale par intérim, maître de cérémonie, pour m'avoir donné la parole. Monsieur le représentant du président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Monsieur le président de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, honorable commissaire, Monsieur le représentant du Haut Commissariat des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme, Monsieur le représentant spécial de l'Union européenne pour les droits de l'homme, distingués délégués des États, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos rangs, titres et qualités respectifs. Au nom du gouvernement et du peuple sénégalais, je voudrais tout d'abord exprimer mes sincères remerciements à la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples pour avoir choisi Dakar pour abriter sa 69e session ordinaire. Je voudrais également remercier la Commission pour toutes les facilités mises à notre disposition pour le bon déroulement de nos travaux. Monsieur le Président, honorable commissaire, cette 69e session ordinaire se tient au moment où nous venons de célébrer le 40e anniversaire de l'adoption de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Elle offre ainsi l'opportunité de jeter un regard à la fois rétrospectif et prospectif sur la situation des droits de l'homme en Afrique. En effet, apprécier les progrès réalisés, identifier les défis à relever, bref, mesurer le chemin parcouru et celui qui reste à faire est un exercice auquel nous devons nous soumettre en permanence si nous voulons faire du respect et de la protection des droits humains une réalité effective partout sur le continent. C'est donc le lieu pour moi de saluer la contribution essentielle de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples à la promotion et à la protection des droits humains en Afrique, en dépit des multiples contraintes qui ont jalonné son parcours. Nous devons certes nous féliciter des avancées enregistrées et qui sont indéniables, il faut le dire, mais nous devons surtout avoir en ligne de mire les actions et les stratégies qui nous permettront de venir à bout des menaces et atteintes aux droits et libertés garantis par la Charte. Mesdames et messieurs, nous ne pouvons plus nous contenter de dénoncer les violations des droits et libertés sur le continent, surtout qu'elles affectent particulièrement les personnes déjà vulnérables. Je fais allusion aux enfants, aux personnes handicapées et âgées, aux femmes, aux réfugiés et déplacés, aux migrants et aux personnes détenues. Toutes ces personnes voient leurs conditions de vie, j'allais dire de survie, se dégrader fortement et parfois de façon irréversible à la survenance de crises politiques, sécuritaires, économiques, sanitaires ou autres. Si le combat reste le même, les stratégies gagneraient à être réadaptées, les efforts davantage conjugués, le mal attaqué à la source. Mesdames et messieurs, promouvoir et protéger les droits humains, c'est contribuer peut-être, même assurer le bien-être des populations. Nous devons donc investir davantage dans les droits humains. C'est à cela que les États parties de la Charte et les autres acteurs sont appelés. C'est aussi la voie choisie par le Sénégal qui, sous l'impulsion du président Macky Sall, a fait des avancées remarquables dans la prise en charge des droits des personnes vulnérables. La criminalisation du viol et de la pédophilie, la modification du code de la nationalité pour permettre à la femme de transmettre sa nationalité à ses enfants, la carte d'égalité des chances, la couverture maladie universelle, les bourses de sécurité familiale, la construction et la réhabilitation des établissements pénitentiaires, la mise en place du bracelet électronique sont autant d'initiatives qui illustrent de façon éloquente l'importance que le gouvernement accorde à la promotion et à la protection des droits humains, en particulier ceux des personnes vulnérables. La crise sanitaire du Covid-19 a été aussi l'occasion pour le gouvernement de renforcer ces mesures, avec notamment la mise en place d'un programme spécial de soutien aux ménages. Ces efforts seront poursuivis et renforcés. Le chemin est encore long, mais nous sommes assurément sur la bonne voie. Monsieur le Président, honorable commissaire, la présentation de rapports périodiques constitue également un baromètre important pour mesurer l'engagement d'un État à respecter, protéger et appliquer les droits consacrés par les instruments auxquels il est parti. À cet égard, je voudrais informer que le Sénégal est en train de travailler pour rattraper tous les retards dans l'élaboration et la présentation de ces rapports. Toutes les dispositions sont en train d'être prises par notre pays en vue de la présentation en un seul document de ces 12e, 13e, 14e et 15e rapports périodiques relatifs à la mise en œuvre de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Mesdames et messieurs, je ne saurais terminer sans réaffirmer la disponibilité du gouvernement du Sénégal à poursuivre et approfondir sa collaboration avec les différents mécanismes de surveillance des droits de l'homme, des Nations Unies et de l'Union africaine, ainsi que les titulaires des mandats spéciaux. Je voudrais également présenter mes félicitations ainsi que mes vœux de réussite au commissaire nouvellement élu et à ceux qui ont été réélus dans l'accomplissement des missions qui leur sont confiées. En souhaitant plein succès à vos travaux, je déclare ouverte la 69e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Secretary of State, Mamadou Sow, for the statement, but also for formally declaring this 69th ordinary session of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights open, and for your kind acceptance as the Republic of Senegal to host this session in the spirit of the continuing commitment of the Republic of Senegal to human rights on the African continent. Thank you so much. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the segment of the program that deals with the delivery of statements from key stakeholders. At this time, it is now the point at which the performance of the administration of the solemn act of administering the oath of office to the newly elected members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights takes place. This is done in accordance with Article 38 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And in this regard, I now have the honor of inviting the chairperson of the commission, Honorable Solomon Ayele Deso, to conduct the administration of oaths.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony, Acting Secretary of the Commission. It is indeed a distinguished honor for me to invite the newly elected members of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And in this respect, I first wish to call upon Honorable Janet Salange to take the oath of office.
Chapter right? As read in conjunction with the language I, Janet Salangai, solemnly declare to discharge my duties.
Thank you very much and congratulations. Yeah, I wish you success. Thank you very much once again, Janet, and congratulations on the membership of the Commission on Human Rights. Wish you all the very best. Wish to invite
as read in conjunction with Rule 9G of the Rules of Procedure of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, I, Rubina Gershon, solemnly declare to discharge my duties impartially.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very welcome. I now wish to call upon Honorable Risa Sow to take the oath of office. Honorable Sow, please come forward.
C'est bon. En conformité avec l'article 38 de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, de l'article 9 du règlement intérieur de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, moi, Idrissa Sow, déclare solennellement de bien et fidèlement remplir mes fonctions en toute impartialité. Je vous remercie. Merci, monsieur le Président.
Your Excellencies, with your kind permission, if we can have a chance for possibility of, on account of the recording problem that we had, to have Honorable Janet Salam to do the oath again.
It's like I'm swearing twice.
Okay, I got it. In conformity with Article 38 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as read in conjunction with Rules 9G of the Rules of Procedure of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, I, Janet Ramotore Salenjai, solemnly declare to discharge my duties impartially and faithfully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
May I once again also call on
This one is a good one.
Because my children are following it.
Yeah.
operating in a COVID environment. Right?
In conformity with Article 38 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, as read in conjunction with Rule 9G of the Rules of Procedure of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, I, Urvina Gerisha Topsisonu, solemnly declare to discharge my duties impartially and faithfully.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very well, very well. Thank you.
It's my daughter.
I know.
She must be very proud.
Yeah. My daughter.
Continue with
And she's in England. Can you?
Okay.
And she's at work. And she's left at work to follow.
Okay. Okay.
Je disais, mesdames, mesdemoiselles et messieurs, bonjour. En raison du fait que notre ancien président, l'honorable Solomon Ayele Derso, a également été élu commissaire pour le nouveau mandat qui commence. Je tiens d'ailleurs à le féliciter très sincèrement pour sa réélection. Nous pouvons juridiquement prêter serment devant lui-même. C'est en qualité de vice-président que je voudrais l'inviter à faire comme tout le monde, à se mettre debout et à prêter serment de servir l'Afrique comme cela est demandé. Je vous donne la parole.
in conformity with Article 38 of the African Charter of Human Rights, made in conjunction with 9G of the Rules of Procedure of the African Commission on Human Rights. I, Solomon Ayele Derso, solemnly declare to discharge my duties impartially and faithfully. May God help me.
On nous indique que le micro était fermé, donc on n'a pas entendu le serment du président Derso. Maintenant, le micro est ouvert. Je voudrais l'inviter. Il n'a pas échappé au sort, comme tous les autres commissaires, à devoir reprêter serment pour la seconde fois. Voilà, vous avez la parole.
I'm joining other colleagues in conformity with Article 38 of the African Charter on Human Rights, as very much with rules 9G of the Rules of Procedure of the African Commission on Human Rights. I, Solomon Ayele Derso, solemnly declare to discharge my duties impartially and faithfully.
Mes félicitations, je prends acte de votre prestation de serment comme commissaire pour le nouveau mandat qui commence. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the administration of oaths to 4 newly elected members of the Commission has now been completed, albeit with slight hiccups in terms of the management of the process, from which we have learned on how to do it better next time. But we thank you for your indulgence. And this part of the proceedings has now come to an end. I would like at this stage, and it is my singular honor and pleasure to invite the Dean of the Commission, Honorable Maya Salih Fadel, to make her closing remarks and also welcome the incoming commissioners as she does so.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la secrétaire exécutive. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, Excellences, Monsieur le représentant du gouvernement de la République du Sénégal, en sa qualité de secrétaire d'État chargé des droits de l'homme et de la bonne gouvernance auprès du ministère de la Justice, Excellences, Monsieur l'ambassadeur Salah Ahmed, représentant du président de la Commission de l'Union africaine, Honorable Président Salomo Derso, président de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Excellences et honorables Madame la Présidente de la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, Excellences, Monsieur le représentant spécial de l'Union européenne pour les droits de l'homme, Excellences également, Monsieur le représentant de la Haute Commissaire des Nations Unies aux droits de l'homme, chargé de l'Afrique de l'Est, Excellences, Madame la secrétaire d'État aux droits de l'homme de la République d'Angola, représentant les États parties à la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, honorables représentants du réseau africain des INDH, honorable également représentante du comité de pilotage des ONG. Distingués invités, mesdames, messieurs, tout protocole respecté. Mesdames et messieurs, l'honneur m'échoit de prendre la parole devant cette auguste assemblée en ma qualité de doyenne de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et de délivrer l'allocution de clôture de cette cérémonie d'ouverture de la 69e session ordinaire de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Cérémonie qui, comme vous l'avez remarqué, a été une cérémonie marquée par des déclarations intenses, riches, véhiculant des messages fermes et clairs et réaffirmant la volonté de faire de notre continent, l'Afrique, un continent de paix, de stabilité et de respect des droits de l'homme. En marquant également la célébration des 40 années d'adoption de la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et les 35 années d'existence de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, à l'entame de mes propos, je voudrais exprimer la reconnaissance de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples à l'endroit de 2 commissaires qui ont terminé leur mandat. Tout d'abord, à l'endroit de la commissaire Kaitesi Sylvie, qui a été également présidente de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples et qui a contribué par l'ensemble de ses travaux à la consolidation des droits de l'homme en Afrique. Elle a été présidente du groupe de travail sur l'abolition de la peine de mort en Afrique, les exécutions extrajudiciaires sommaires et arbitraires et les disparitions forcées. À ce titre, elle a contribué à l'origine de l'étude sur la peine de mort en Afrique. Elle a été également la cheville ouvrière de l'élaboration du projet de protocole sur l'abolition de la peine de mort en Afrique. Elle a également fortement contribué, avec un certain nombre de partenaires, à mettre en place un groupe de travail dynamique chargé de renforcer le plaidoyer autour de l'abolition de la peine de mort, tout en contribuant également à l'élaboration d'une observation générale sur le droit à la vie. Madame Kaitesi a été une commissaire qui a contribué fortement à des messages de respect, de promotion et de protection des droits de l'homme. Notre reconnaissance va également s'exprimer à l'endroit de la commissaire Jamesina Essi Leonora King pour avoir contribué également à consolider le travail de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples au cours de ces 6 années de bons et loyaux services auprès de la Commission africaine. Sachez que nous garderons de vous les bons souvenirs partagés et l'excellente relation que nous avons réussi à entretenir tout au long de ces années passées ensemble à la Commission et surtout votre perpétuel sourire et votre esprit de conciliation. Nous espérons que vous poursuivrez également votre combat pour la promotion et la protection des droits de l'homme à travers vos nouvelles responsabilités. Au sein de la Commission, la commissaire King a assumé 2 importants mandats, à savoir la présidence du groupe de travail sur les droits économiques et sociaux et culturels, ainsi que le mandat de rapporteur spécial sur la liberté d'expression et l'accès à l'information. En sa qualité de présidente du groupe de travail sur les droits économiques et socio-culturels, elle a contribué au développement du protocole sur la sécurité sociale. Elle a également pris en charge et assuré le développement et l'adoption des lignes directrices sur le droit à l'eau. En sa qualité de rapporteur spécial sur la liberté d'expression et l'accès à l'information, Elle a opérationnalisé et disséminé les principes directeurs sur la liberté d'expression et l'accès à l'information en Afrique, adoptés en 2019. Qu'elle soit également remerciée et toutes vos contributions auront permis également de renforcer les droits de l'homme en Afrique. À nos nouveaux collègues qui viennent de nous rejoindre, commissaire Idrissa Sow, commissaire Janet Salah Nji et commissaire Jirshisha Topsi Sono, je m'excuse pour le nom, je voudrais encore une fois de plus vous souhaiter la bienvenue au sein de la grande famille de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Comme vous aurez le constaté, le chantier est vaste et les attentes nombreuses. Mais j'ai bon espoir qu'avec votre aide, nous parviendrons à répondre à quelques attentes. C'est dire donc, chers collègues, que nous attendons beaucoup de vous en termes de représentation de grande qualité de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Mais nous souhaitons surtout que vous puissiez contribuer à améliorer et à faire avancer les droits de l'homme en Afrique en nous penchant tous ensemble sur les problèmes et sujets de préoccupation qui nous interpellent. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, à tous les participants nous ayant rejoints aujourd'hui, veuillez recevoir nos sincères remerciements pour votre perpétuel soutien dans cette noble tâche et espérons pouvoir continuer à compter sur vous dans le futur, car comme vous le savez, les droits de l'homme, c'est notre responsabilité collective. Et pour ce faire, nous devons nous entraider, maintenant plus que jamais, avec les nombreux défis qui se posent à nous, particulièrement avec la pandémie de la COVID-19 qui est venue exacerber les problèmes déjà existants. Cependant, j'ai foi que nous relèverons encore une fois de plus des défis et nous ferons en sorte que les droits de l'homme deviennent une réalité pour tous en Afrique. Mesdames et Messieurs, Excellences, je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention. C'est dire encore une fois combien cette session va engager l'ensemble des commissaires sur la voie de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme. Avant de terminer, je voudrais encore une fois vous remercier pour votre aimable attention. Shukran ala intibahukum. Thank you for your attention and obrigado sia attenzione. Si j'ai bien prononcé en portugais. Merci encore.
Thank you so much, Honorable Maya Salih Fadel, for your closing remarks, for saluting the distinguished service of the outgoing members of the Commission and welcoming the incoming members. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, this brings us to the end of the opening ceremony. All dignitaries and participants will observe a health break whilst the Commission retreats into an hour-and-a-half private session to elect a new bureau and to adopt its agenda. Therefore, the public session of the Commission will resume at 13:30 GMT. 13:30 GMT. Upon our return, when the Commission resumes, it will be to announce the new bureau of the Commission and to proceed with one agenda item, that of the state of human rights in Africa. The agenda for the public session is on the website, and we encourage our stakeholders to view the agenda, which has a few revised amendments. We will then meet again then at 13:30 GMT, 13:30 Dakar time, 13:30 Dakar time. Thank you, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen.
On coupe, hein?